He's still waiting on the YouTube side there.
Okay.
Should be soon, and checking in the back end too for other monitors. And we're live. 3, 2, 1, go.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining the B-Sides event today. And I just want to thank the event organizers for having me. This will be a little bit different talk. It's not about red teaming or blue teaming or purple teaming. It's about polyhedral dice teaming. So this is all of the skills from Dungeons and Dragons that I think are critical that are used in the workplace. So I hope everybody has their little polyhedral dice ready to go. This will be a little bit different talk. All right. So I'm not going to spend too much time about who am I. I can make the slides available later if anybody wants them. I'm an Army veteran, served 10 years. Spent several years as a contractor, a few years in federal government, back in contracting. My area of expertise is cyber threat intelligence analysis. I will take all questions about role-playing games and about soccer. So I'm assuming most people here watching the stream have some idea what Dungeons and Dragons is. But if you just came across this randomly and you don't know, this is a tabletop RPG, a tabletop role-playing game, generally in person with between 2 to 8 people. Obviously, in the COVID world, the online aspects of this have increased. So there's a lot more online versions and groups doing this. And yes, the nerdiest game on earth requires you to play with some of your closest friends or frenemies. So we have tons of books, dice, miniatures, or the little figures. And just so you understand some of the lingo, the dungeon master or game master, DM or GM, sort of organizes the event. They're the narrator, the arbiter of rules. They run the sessions that all the players participate in. And the adventuring party are all of the people who are playing in the game that are not the DM or GM. We use dice to add randomness to the game. So polyhedral dice are a thing that all of us RPG players use. So what does Dungeons and Dragons look like? It could look like this, people sitting around with a map, right? So this is the non-online version. It could look like this. It is available for people of every age group, every background, plays Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games. And it looks like this because everybody has a ton of material and books and references. And actually, I don't even play Dungeons and Dragons anymore. Technically, I play Pathfinder, but that's a whole nother discussion we may get into. So to get into the meat of this, skills that I have acquired through Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games that I use in the workplace: research and reading comprehension. So I have a few terms up here: meritocracy, oligarchy, patriarchy. I learned about all of these terms from books that I was reading when I was a teenager. Right? That's the first time I read about why is a feudal government set up the way it is. And it was like the Library of Alexandria, because yes, this is a fantasy-based game, but there's a lot of elements in it that have historical or real-world applications, like governments, monetary systems, how we want to organize a lawful system of government. What are the laws? Who gets to decide? Right. So a lot of times you might not think that goes into a fantasy setting, but it really does. So as a GM or as a player, you might be doing a lot of research and a lot of in-depth reading comprehension if you take these games fairly seriously. And then as a GM or someone that runs the games, we're interested in, reading up on what's the weather going to be like for this session, what sorts of religions might be involved, are there unusual plants, different monsters, how will magic work, are there some podcasts I should listen to get ideas, right? And it goes on and on and on in terms of research and reading comprehension. And a lot of people who are interested in role-playing games are voracious readers, right? We're consuming large amounts of information. Right? Does that sound like something we might do in cyber? Absolutely. Regardless of where you're at in cybersecurity, we're consuming huge amounts of information. So I said I work in cyber threat intelligence. So I am focused on a particular geographic area in the world, but even with that limitation, there's a huge amount of threat actors that I have to follow. So being able to consume a lot of information and understand it is really critical. So the other big one here is written and verbal communication skills. So again, not a hard technical skill. There's no CompTIA or EC Council presentation plus certificate that you can get. But we all know that people in our field have to have these skills. This even came up in an earlier presentation about the pen testing, where we talked about the written reports and how critical the written report is. And who is the report for? Is there an actual executive section? Is the executive section something that an executive can actually read and understand and benefit from a business aspect? And obviously anybody who plays role-playing games and Dungeons and Dragons, communication is huge, right? So notes to the players, planning your sessions, trying to figure out NPC backstories as a GM, as a player character, figuring out your backstory, right? There's written communication, and some people do that more or less than others. But from people I know, friends and associates that play this game, especially if they began early, writing and speaking in front of other people tends to come a little bit more naturally. So I think there's a direct correlation to being involved in Dungeons & Dragons and role-playing games like this and having a comfort with some written and verbal communication. So this is not to say that you should necessarily play Dungeons & Dragons to increase these skills, but these skills definitely are used both when I'm running games, playing games, and at work as well. So the next thing, cooperative problem solving. So anybody who's...
John, real quick, sorry, could you stop your share and reshare it? It looks like we're getting some share issues where it's going over the screen. Thank you. Sorry about that.
So I've reshared the presentation.
Thank you.
Is that working?
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Sure. It wouldn't be an online event if there weren't some technical difficulties. So cooperative problem solving. Everybody who's done a group project anywhere in their school understands this, right? So at work, we are going to routinely be asked to solve problems, overcome challenges in a team, right? In a group, right? So from the Dungeons and Dragons perspective, like every encounter, every session is going to have problem solving. And this can be both in-game, in the fantasy world itself, and out of game, right? There's going to be problems that arise out of the game as well. How do you interpret a particular rule? How does this spell work? I remember going back and forth about, the mathematical formulas about volume related to fireballs at one point. The rules did not really go into that level of detail necessary. So this also will tie into critical thinking as well, because in cooperative problem solving, we often should be getting diversity of ideas so we don't have groupthink, and that's really important as well. And we'll come back to an idea related to groupthink when we talk about creativity, but problem solving and understanding team dynamics and how to work within a team is going to be really important in your cybersecurity career, right? I am not a fan of the mantra of InfoSec rock stars. I don't think that works. I don't think that they have been particularly helpful, the ones that I have encountered. And the people who are better at working as a team and collaboratively and cooperatively trying to figure out solutions to problems are probably going to do better than people who are rugged individuals who have trouble in teams. That's not to say they might not have a good career, but I've seen that person not do as well as people who can embrace cooperative problem solving. So everybody who's played in a role-playing game knows how difficult this can be. So the other thing, if you're someone that runs games as a GM or a DM, man, the planning you have to do to run your game and get it successful, especially now in COVID, and maybe it's gone online, or maybe there's certain people in your sort of family pod that you're playing with, and you've had to change the game because other people you're not in contact with them. So this is basically project management. I mean, this is planning, right? Anytime you're planning anything with adults, it's complicated, right? We've all had a Facebook invited 150 people to some Facebook event, and then 3 people show up, right? That's just how it works when we're all adults. So what do we do with conflicts? So conflicts around planning, right? Just like the meme on the slide says, if 75% of the crew can make a session, do you have the session? Well, what do you do for the person who couldn't make the session? How do you handle that? Are they going to be frustrated? Are they going to be upset? Do they understand? What if do they get experience if they weren't able to make the session, or are they going to be a level below everybody else, because then that might have to change the encounter level, right? So all of that goes into planning.
Hey, John, real quick, sorry again. Could you stop share, reshare again? We're getting the screen artifact again. Thank you. Sorry.
How's that?
You're good.
We
Thank
good?
you. You're good.
All right. So, and then this is also in and out of game, right? So there's planning in game of what's going to happen in the session. Are we using a pre-made adventure? Am I going to run my own adventure? You know, what encounters am I going to have? Am I going to have some random encounters? Am I going to wing it? Right? I actually enjoy winging it quite a bit when I'm the GM, with certain things planned, but not everything. And what about the calendars and emails and invites and coordination, right? Which also ties back into communication, right? And there's some other planning and project management also around dealing with your friends, right? So it's one thing at work to have teamwork and project management and cooperative problem solving. It's another thing to do it with people that are your friends in, you know, from your role playing groups as well. That adds another level of you know, potential stress to get things working with everybody. So moving on. So creativity and imagination. So this is one of the ones that I think is often undervalued in our world. But those of us who were ever in the military have at some point, and probably multiple times, asked the question of, why do we do it that way? And the answer has been, because that's how we do it, or because that's how we've always done it, right? So no one has thought of a better way to do some particular process. So this could be technical. This could be directly related to something technically that you're doing in the field, or it could be something related to process, right? It could be an SOP that maybe doesn't make sense anymore because it hasn't been updated in 3 years. It could be about how we handle patching and why are we patching this way, right? So imagination and creativity is obviously hugely important for those of us that play role-playing games, you know, Dungeons and Dragons or whichever role-playing game you want, Cthulhu, D20 Modern. And we can use this in the workplace when we are trying to overcome a problem or a challenge, right? Those of us that are creative and really do use our imagination routinely can come up with some other ideas. The other place that I think that this is really important that's not on the slide is to play devil's advocate. If you are in a situation or a meeting where everyone has sort of agreed very quickly to do X, right, you might want to play devil's advocate to throw some other ideas out there. They might not actually even be ideas you want to see implemented, but it may help to get the conversation going. It may help to figure out some pros and cons on solution X that people have already decided is the way to go. And then in my world and in red teaming and adversary emulation and pen testing, can you think like the adversary? And I don't mean, can you think like the adversary that I might, once I'm on the box, use a PowerShell exploit to laterally move? I also mean, think like the adversary, like we are a large Fortune 20 bank who is being attacked by APT 123. And what are the motivations and goals of this persistent threat actor? It could also be understanding the geopolitical environment, right? If you are working at a very large organization with offices worldwide, the geopolitical climate in different places is going to change over time. The threat landscape may change much differently in those disparate locations. So can someone who is creative and imaginative also better lend themselves to think more like the adversary? So I think that's another area that this can also be applied to. So I covered a number of different things already. So hopefully the slide is good, because there's a lot of other InfoSec related skills that I think are directly applicable to those of us who enjoy role-playing games and participate either as a player or as a GM or a DM. So I like thinking on your feet, right? Because no matter how good you have planned an encounter or a session, the players are gonna railroad you and go off on some tangent, right? It always happens. So as a DM or GM, I want to embrace that, and I want to come up with something real quick off the top of my feet, off the top of my head, right? And this has actually applied to me before. I was in the workplace and a senior executive just walked up behind me and starts talking to me, right? Man, you want to make a good impression, right? I know who this person is. They are very important to this organization. So think on your feet, answer the questions. It also basically got me my first job in cyber because we were walking around, because we're on the bench, which is in consulting, you're waiting to be client facing. And we basically overheard some people talking about a problem they had. And that was how my buddy and I signed ourselves up to make a 4-week course for the Army about cyber in 3 weeks, which was very interesting. Critical thinking and root cause analysis. Root cause analysis. Why is the evil wizard in this village? Why does he keep attacking this village? What is the deal with him and this small village of 75 people? Like, what's the motive that he has to cause mayhem for these poor peasants out in the wilderness, right? And obviously that's the D&D example, but root cause analysis, finding the thing that's wrong, is obviously an infosec skill. Whether we're talking about like figuring out a firewall problem, is it a Discord problem? That root cause analysis is something that we're doing in the game, but we're not thinking about it routinely. So the social emotional learning or social intelligence is not something that gets discussed a lot. But as you play games with your friends and there's conflicts in and out of the game with your group of friends, right, that is teaching you some skills around social emotional development and social techniques to solve problems. Right. So this is something that I think is pretty interesting as a person who's led individuals, led teams at work, right? Trying to resolve problems with people at work is sort of one level of difficulty and stress, right? You may like some people at work. You may not like some people at work. You might like your boss. You might not like your boss, right? But when you are in a group like this and you want it to be fun, generally you're playing with people you get along with to some degree. But when there's a conflict there, you are now in a conflict resolution state with people that you care about, which means that hopefully then you could parlay that skill to being a better conflict resolution manager at work because you have done it in this environment. I really think all of the skills that kind of are on this slide speak to the soft critical skills that oftentimes we're not talking about a lot in the cybersecurity and infosec community, like the researching, the ability to communicate effectively. There was a presentation at Hacker Halted earlier this week where we talked about communication, but we talked about report writing. So I know that a lot of very technical folks do not like to be the people writing reports, regardless of field. If you're a pen tester, you're on a blue team, you're in cyber threat intel, right? A lot of people don't like writing reports. I do not have a problem with writing reports. A lot of people also have some challenges and problems with speaking, even in front of very small groups, right? So those of us that go and play role-playing games have spoken in front of at least small groups of people, which is generally how we encourage people to build up their confidence to speak in front of groups. Not everyone in the career field needs to get on stage at a B-Sides or get in front of executives, but if you want to have career flexibility and growth and promotion, both of these things are going to be critical. Writing reports, briefing people. It's a huge part of how you'll be able to advance your career. In addition to all of the other things on here, I know I sort of briefly touched on that project management and planning and scheduling, but that is huge in a work environment. Understanding your boss's schedule, making other people informed of your calendar. I mean, I take that skill for granted, but based on firsthand experience, this is not a set of skills that people just inherently have. So that is actually really important because we need project management. We need people to make sure everybody's coming together at the right time frames to accomplish those particular tasks so we can deliver the solution or come to whatever that project needs to be at the end of the day. So I think And those of you who have played Dungeons and Dragons or other role-playing games, right? There's a lot of things that we're doing in the game, in-game, out-of-game with that group that translate into some really important skills that you can use in the workplace. So I did want to leave a little bit of time for some questions and answers. So I will try to see if I can see anything in the Discord chat. And if not, then I can talk about one or two other points. So let me see if there's anything in Discord.
Yeah, John, I'm not seeing anything yet. I'll let you know also from the YouTube. Also, just to let you know, the slides, you might have to reshare again. There, now I can see it. Okay, thank you.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, so if I don't have any questions, I'm a big advocate of, especially for junior folks who are trying to make their way into cybersecurity, right? There's been a few presentations that sort of talked on that subject today. It's obviously a big concern. Is one, Alyssa Miller's presentation on barista to pen tester, where we talk about the skills that a barista might have. Right? I take multiple inputs and prioritize them to accomplish certain tasks, right? So if you're a junior and you're trying to shape your resume based on your volunteer work, projects you did in school, right? We want to think about all of the skills that are critical to make you successful at work. I mean, clearly you're going to need some technical skills to work in cybersecurity. Obviously, depending on your specialization, that might change a little bit. But most of these skills that are on the slide and that I've talked about are going to really be helpful to you, regardless of which specialization you find yourself in cybersecurity. So I'm not necessarily advocating that everyone should go play Dungeons and Dragons to get these skills. But I think that there's methods to get these types of skills if some of them aren't something that's already in your toolkit. There's classes about critical thinking. There's classes you can take about root cause analysis. And this may vary depending on where exactly you find yourself in the community, because there's so many different specializations. Yeah, in terms of gamification and learning, I see a comment in there. That's definitely something that certain organizations and businesses are doing to gamify learning as well. So that's another tie-in for those of us who have skills in the RPG arena and have or are gamers, right? We can translate how that works to gamification. I understand how quest lines should work, right? There's a lot of theory we could get in about why people play video games and what keeps them hooked into video games, right? So could we gamify CTFs even more so that people are earning, rewards as they go along to make sure that they get hooked? That's pretty interesting to think about from that perspective. So yeah, I don't know if there was anything else, if I missed any other messages there.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, I don't have off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you where to get additional resources related to that. But if you're in the InfoSec Twitter space, which I highly encourage, there are definitely people doing gamification of cyber-related learning. So yes, that is definitely happening. So again, if you want to bridge two things that you're interested in, and you are a gamer in some capacity and are interested in helping, a lot of the companies that are doing training, virtual training, range training, are trying to incorporate gamification into that as well.
All right, thank you, John. Sorry about the technical difficulties there, but very good information. Thank you.
Yeah, and if any, my contact information is now on the screen as well. I'm on Twitter a lot, as much as I can be, which probably isn't healthy, but you can find me there. Thanks for having